Hi, guys. This week is going to be a little bit different. We'll review some recent events from the last week, and then I want to spend some time talking about some 3D concepts in depth, some new learning material I'm working on. I'd like to run it by you, try to explain it myself, and then try to get an idea of like where everybody's at with that kind of stuff because I really don't know, how much of this stuff people actually know already, and it'll be interesting to find out. So last week, Ultra Engine 1.01 dropped. This adds a menu system for your games. The SSAO effect has been improved. You can grab a universal identifier for each entity from the map as you're editing a scene, and then you can use that to retrieve that exact entity in code when you run your game. And there's just been a ton of just small improvements here and there added to the whole thing. It's the whole software is virtually bug free now. The undo redo system is finally completed. It's really a really solid update. And I'm working on some new learning material. Oh yeah, Resonant Dusk was released last week. It's out now. It was released Monday the 13th, and this is a great game to play during Halloween. It's like a point and click adventure puzzle game made with Leadwerks 4.6. And definitely check this out on Steam. This is really cool. Um, okay, so I wanted to, I thought, I've been thinking, we've been talking a lot about, related to just like, containment breach. And for some reason, I've been talking about like my experience learning to program games and learning how 3D graphics works. Um, I've kind of been like at times I've been talking about like how I learned with like Dark Basic and Blitz 3D and um, how that just kind of like taught me how 3D stuff works. And I want to write a tutorial series about 3D spatial concepts in general, and not so much focused on mathematics. The math is definitely an important part because that powers the whole thing, but more focused on the concepts, and then the math is just there to prove that it works. Um, but these concepts, like learning all this stuff was a really interesting experience, and I really have no idea like when people when I tell someone, oh, transform a point from one space to another, and then uh, do a raycast between that and this other point, like, do people actually like see the same thing in their mind that I see? Um, because that was definitely a skill that I had to develop over time. So this is some new material. It's not finished yet, but I just kind of want to like run it by you and try to explain it out loud and get an idea of where people are at with this stuff. So I don't really think in numbers. I think in pictures. Um, and one-dimensional space is just one dimension of numbers, and I just put things on a number line, like you were taught to in school, and that's kind of how I think about everything. So one interesting thing we can do just using one dimension is interpolation. That means moving from one point, like here we're moving from 1 to 5, doing that over time. There's different ways we can do that. So the step function is a new one. Um, and this will just move things at a constant rate. It'll just add a constant value to your current value. And so this code will step from starting at 0, going to 5. I guess we should start at 1 because we were saying we were going to start at 1 in the picture. Okay. And it's just saying while n is less than the target value, so the n is the current value, the target value is 5, then n equals step in target 1. So that means it's just going to add 1 to the current value until we reach the target. And when we run that, we get back 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what we're doing there is we're just shifting the value each iteration. We're just shifting 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, simple. So that's just going to give you a constant motion. No acceleration, no deceleration. It just instantly starts at that speed, and it keeps going at that speed until it reaches the destination value. Okay. Linear interpolation is another technique we have, and that's with the mix function. And what it does is it mixes two values. So if you have your current value and your target value, and then you have this blend value P, then this is the formula actually for this. And this is actually this is a function in the GLSL shader language. It's just a built-in function. And let's take a look at what that kind of interpolation does. Let's take a look at the math of what the numbers print out. And then we'll see it in motion in a few minutes. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so what's going on here is the first value, we're starting at 1, and then the first value is a big jump to 3. The second value is a smaller jump to 4, and then 4.5, 4.75, 4.875. So because the blend value here is 0.5, we're taking the difference between the current value and the target value, and we're dividing it by half, and we're moving that much each frame. So if you picture this is how I picture it. The first step is from 1 to 3 because you're taking the difference between 1 and 5 and dividing it by half. That's a big jump, so that's a lot of velocity there. And then it slows. You see how it slows down each time because now at 3 to 5, well, half the difference is 4. And then it takes half the difference again, so it's 4.5 and smaller and smaller and smaller. In fact, the only reason it ever reaches 5 is because of floating point imprecision. If we actually did this like correctly mathematically with any numbers were allowed, it would never reach 5. It would converge on 5, but you could keep doing this forever, and it would never actually reach 5. So the implications of this for games are, well, if the target value is far away from the current value, then the current value will change quickly to catch up with it. So it's got like this, it's going to have this like rubber band effect. And then as the current value gets closer and closer to the target value, that movement gets slower and slower and slower. So let's see what, let's look at what this looks like on the screen with constant motion. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to draw 2 boxes on the screen, and I'm going to move the target left and right with the arrow keys. Let me just run it. It's easier for me to run this than to explain it. Okay, so the green object is going to use the step function, so it's going to use constant motion. The blue object is going to use the mix function, so it's going to use linear interpolation, and I'll show you the difference when I move the target side to side. You see how the green object just moves at a constant rate? And the blue object, it has this like rubber band effect where it starts really fast and then it slows down as it approaches the target. And if you look carefully, which object reaches the target first?
The blue one.
The green one. The green one gets there first. Watch. Because when the green one stops moving, the blue one is not quite there yet.
there's a real world practical equation on this that people have done where you line up like 100 bottles and you ask people to go from either the end or the front. And if you start at the end, you'll actually finish faster than the guy who starts at the front. You have to cover a greater distance. Isn't linear algebra fun?
Wait, what's that? Bottles at the end, the front? I don't.
I'll post the
Okay.
video of it.
All right. So that's constant. I don't know what you call, like, the second one is linear interpolation. I'm not sure what the correct term for the first one is, but that's the step function for the constant motion, and then mix for linear interpolation. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as LERP, LERP, but I chose to call it mix. Okay. Let's see. We can also use this as a general smoothing technique. I remember like learning this stuff in Dark Basic actually, like, and theirs was a little bit different. They called it the curve function, and it was basically mix, except the last value was inverted, so it was like a smoothness value. So it was performing a mix operation with one divided by the last parameter. Um, but we can use this as a general smoothing function. So I'm controlling the green object with the arrow keys, and then we're using linear interpolation to make the blue object smoothly follow. And you'll notice as the green box gets further and further away, the blue object kind of adjusts its speed to catch up so it doesn't get left behind. So that gives us a nice smooth motion. Okay, so let's add another dimension and get two-dimensional space. Um, Now when we have two-dimensional space, we add a second axis to our number line, and now we have a grid. This is no longer two number lines like perpendicular like this. That means at 90 degrees. Now it's a grid. And each point on our grid has two coordinates. One is for x, that's the horizontal, and the other is for the y-axis, that's the vertical axis. So this point is 3, 2. That means we go over 1, 2, 3 on the x-axis, and we go positive 1, 2 on the y-axis, and that's our coordinate, 3, 2. Okay. Now the center of the grid, also the point 0, 0, this is always called the origin. So you might hear something like the distance to the origin. That just means distance to point 0, 0. Okay. Now we're going to try linear interpolation on two axes. And we'll see what that looks like. Now I'm going to be able to move up and down and left and right. And my blue box is staying right on top of the green one. Pretty cool, huh? I can make a little character that follows me, my little buddy, or I can just use this to smooth out motion. Okay. Now, last example here. Let's try using this to make a spaceship. Now we have a spaceship with nice smooth controls that looks like how it would look in a game. And that's just using linear interpolation, using the mix value on two axes. Okay, so before we move on, let me ask you guys, like, how many of you already knew this stuff? Is this like super remedial? Or is this stuff that you kind of knew it, but you didn't really know it? Or is it completely new to you?
For me, I worked with it directly. It's just standard equations. So
I knew it, but I didn't like understand how it worked.
And what about the people who aren't answering? And you guys out on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know in the comments. Is this stuff? Is this like really really boring to you, or is this new information that you didn't actually know, or you didn't understand it in that amount of detail?
I do have to like say that when I first started Leadwerks like 10 years ago, like I didn't understand what the curve function did, or what the difference between lerp and curve angle and all that nonsense. So having this explain everything is really nice.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, my thinking here is like, this is stuff that I just kind of assume everybody understands it. There'll be more, there's a couple more lessons I have right now to talk about, and they'll get a lot harder. But, well, not harder, but more advanced. I mean, these are like the basic building blocks you need to understand to make games. My hope here is that I suspect a lot of people don't know this stuff as well as they should, and it would benefit them a lot to know this stuff a lot better, like, and just not just know it in their brain, but like just have it be intuitive to where you can just instantly, like, you just always know how it works. Because I'm thinking if I can if I can teach people to think in 3D the way I've learned to, then I think it will get we'll get fewer requests of like, how do I set up the camera this certain way, because you guys will just be able to look at it. You'll be able to look at a game and say, and you just instantly know in your mind, oh, I know exactly how to do that because I know, what tools I have for controlling 3D space. And it's, the math is part of it, but the math is sort of not that important. It's more important that you understand that you just have it develop an intuitive understanding of 3D space. And I really recommend everybody get a notepad full of graph paper and a ruler and a scientific calculator and a black pen and a mechanical pen and some mechanical pencils. Depending on what you're doing, you might want to erase or you might not want to. Get a big eraser too, like one of those big ones. But I did a lot of drawing when I was learning this stuff. I drew a lot of stuff on paper, and I still, like, whenever I'm working with a difficult concept and I'm trying to figure out how to do something, I will often draw it out on paper if it's really difficult. And I think it's just the physical, the experience of physically drawing something with your hands. It really does a good job of training your brain to think in 3D. So if you draw enough pictures with your hands, eventually you're just going to see those pictures in your mind, and you're not going to have to draw them anymore. So let's talk about 2D graphics with a focus on the spatial properties of these things. So screen coordinates, in computer graphics, screen coordinates go the x-axis, the positive x-axis goes to the right. So the x coordinate gets bigger as you move to the right. So 0, 0 is over here, and then if this window is 1280 by 720, the coordinate 1280, 0 is going to be over here. However, in screen coordinates are upside down, basically. Like, this is 0, 0, and then this is 0, 720. This corner down here is 1280, 720. And I think the reason for this is because, we read from the right to the left and top down. And applications are usually designed from like the top left corner down. Like, where's the file? Where's the menu at the top? And where does the menu start? On the left here. Where's the toolbar at the top? We kind of design everything with the top from the top left corner, and then we just fill the rest of the program, the window, with whatever, as much space as we have. We fill it up with all the other stuff, but the really important stuff is always in the top left corner. And so it kind of makes sense to do screen coordinates this way. But if you're trying to relate this to like the side view of a world, then your coordinates are going to be kind of upside down. So that can be a little bit confusing sometimes. But we'll if you practice, it'll just become second nature to you. Now we're often working with windows where we don't know what the screen size is going to be. And so we don't like to hard code these coordinates. Like, if I was making a game and I wanted something right in the center of the window, I would not type in these numbers, because the game might be played on a variety of different resolutions. So we have some formulas that are commonly used to give us the coordinate of, at certain points on the screen. So like 0, 0 is always going to be the top left. But if we use framebuffer.size.x and then 0, that's going to give us the top right. If we want the center, then we just take the frame buffer size divided the same frame buffer size on the x and y axis, so the width and the height, divided by 2. That gives us the exact center of the screen, and so on. So frame buffer size on both axes, like the width and the height, that's the width and the height. That's going to give us the bottom right corner. And so when you use this instead of typing in the exact numbers, then your game can just dynamically adjust to the size of the screen.
That reminds me of how Source Engine does it, which is why it's very good at scaling.
So how many people knew that screen coordinates were upside down? That they start at the top?
I did.
Everybody? Okay.
I don't think the people, Siponen and Broadworks here knew that, but
Well, Breadwork says he did not.
Siponen
The other one did. Okay. And how about you folks at home, out in YouTube land? Let us know in the comments. Did you know that screen coordinates, the vertical, did you know that the Y starts at the top and that it goes positive as it gets to the bottom of the screen? It becomes a bigger number. Let us know in the comments below. Okay. Tiles. In Leadwerks 5, we have a class called a tile. And a tile is a 2D object that gets drawn on the screen. It can be a rectangle, it can be an image, or it can be text. And the tile orientation, a tile is oriented like the screen. It's oriented around its upper left corner. So I'll copy and paste this code. And what this does is, you can see here, it says create tile. The width and the height are 150 pixels. It's going to turn it blue, set the color to 001, that's blue. And then it's going to set the position to 1010. So it won't be quite in the corner, it'll be in the upper left corner, but indented by 10 units. So the tile position is right here in the upper left corner. And doing it this way is really handy when you're drawing 2D graphics, but it's not always what we want. Now, if we want to draw it in let's say we want to draw it in the bottom right-hand corner. Let's change this position. Comment this out. So now I'm going to set the position to frame buffer size X minus tile size X minus 10. So the tile is oriented right here. Like this is the position of the tile. So if I want it to appear in the bottom right corner, if I just put it here, then it's going to be off screen. If I indent it by 10, then we're just going to see a 10 by 10 blue square in the corner. I want to move the coordinate back by the width and the height of the tile. So I want it to actually be positioned right about here. And that's why I'm subtracting the tile size on both the X and the Y axes. See that? If I don't subtract the tile size, I'm just going to make it frame buffer dot size minus 10, frame buffer size minus 10. Well, it's doing what I told it, because that's the tile position right there in the upper left corner. But that's not what I wanted in this case. So we can change that handle position. We can change it to be a different position. So here's where it is by default. And if we call tile set handle negative tile size divided by 2 and negative tile size divided by 2, then that moves it to the center right here, because we're shifting the whole thing. We're shifting the tile over so that the handle is in the center. In this case, let's see if we can draw it in the bottom corner. Let's see if we, okay, so if we position it here, frame buffer width and height minus 10, then this is what we get. Let's see if we can shift the tile handle to get it to draw where we want without changing the position. Tile set handle negative tile dot size dot x negative tile dot size dot y. And so I'm shifting the handle all the way over, and I think that'll make it appear. Yeah, so now what I did is I moved the handle from this position on the tile over that much and down that much. So now when I draw the tile at the same position, now the whole thing has been shifted over.
Why is it negative?
Because I just programmed it that way. I was thinking about actually changing that because, you know, I mean, it's kind of arbitrary, but I might change it if it doesn't break existing code. As I was writing this tutorial, that actually occurred to me. So if we want to draw something in the center of the screen, let's see. First, I'll just draw it with the default handle. So you can see what that looks like. Okay, if we don't change the tile handle and we draw it at frame buffer width and height divided by 2, then it's doing what we told it to, because this is the position. This is where it's oriented around, but it's not in the center. So we could subtract half the width and the height of the tile from this position that we pointed at, or we can just set the handle. And we have this handy mid-handle function, and this will just automatically center the tile around its center. And now, since the handle is right here, when we draw the tile at the center of the screen, the tile will be perfectly centered.
And congratulations, now you know how to draw a crosshair on the screen.
Yep. Now you don't need the tutorial, how do I draw a crosshair? We can also rotate tiles. Let's see. And again, by default, rotation's going to look like that. I'm actually going to change the position here. So it's rotating around the center of the screen. Technically, it's doing what we told it to, but this probably isn't what we want. What we probably want is to just call tile mid handle is the easy way. And now it's rotating around its center. Okay. Now, how many people knew this? Nobody. Okay.
I did, but
Well, I do. I just figured,
Oh, okay. All right, you guys, if you don't know it, you can just say you don't know it, and otherwise, I'll assume you do from now on. Okay. We can take a 3D a coordinate. We can take a 2D coordinate, a screen coordinate, and we can convert it into an angle using this angle function, and we can use that to make an object rotate the way we want. Here we have the spaceship is rotating around to face the mouse. And the way I did this is I took the mouse coordinate, and then I subtracted the center of the screen, which is right here, from the mouse coordinate to give me the mouse coordinate relative to the spaceship. And then I just took this coordinate here, x and y, and I put that into this angle function, which I added because we were talking last week how atan is very unintuitive. Angle will just accepts x and y, and it'll always give you a value between 0 and 360. And that's how we can make an object rotate to face another object. Well, just like, so yeah, this is what's going on. You've got the mouse position and the screen center, and we subtract the screen center from the mouse position to give us this coordinate relative to the center. And then this is the resulting angle we get. So we can also, we saw in the last lesson, we saw interpolation just between two numbers, and we also saw it in 2D. But we can also do interpolation of rotation. This is when things start to get pretty fun. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get the let's see. I'm gonna get this angle, and I'm gonna call that A. But then I'm going to take a smooth angle, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the mix function, and the current value is gonna be the tile rotation, its current rotation, and the target value is going to be this angle that we just found with the angle function. And then I'm going to make this pretty slow, so I'm going to use 0.05 for the blend value. So that means it will be more like, it'll only change 5%. It'll only move towards the target rotation 5% each time it runs. Oh, cool. Uh-oh. What's happening? Okay, so the angles are, out here, this is 0 degrees. And then 90 degrees, 180, 270. Then we're getting higher and higher up to 359. And then we cross over And because it's going from like 355 to 5, it's taking the long way around because it doesn't know that those numbers are supposed to be an angle. Fortunately, we have a function designed for this. It's called mix angle. And if we use that instead of mix, then we'll get smooth rotation all the way around. We also have we can also use step this way. We have a function called step angle. This one's new. It was just added a day or two ago. I think yesterday actually. And this is going to give us constant rotation at a constant speed. Oh, I need to increase that value because that's a very small value too. We'll make it 1 degree. So it'll change at a constant speed of 1 degree each frame. So you can see how that's a completely different motion. This looks like more like a robot. So you could use this to maybe for like a turret to make it point at the player, because it looks like it looks like something mechanical moving. So that's interpolation of rotation. Before we continue, yes, exactly. Yes, that's my hope. See, Broadworks is already saying, "Wow, I can do a top-down game with this following the mouse." Yes, that's how you do it. Yeah, he sees. So, how many people understood how to do like in general, like how to do like interpolation of rotation like that, like I just showed you?
When it comes to angles, that's when my brain gets a little hard to understand.
My only advice is view each intersecting angle as a 2D plane and then just use an intersection in your head to be like, okay, if I'm doing X, Y, and Z, then I just do X to Y or Z to Y and so on, and then you just simplify it. It's the best way to do it.
No, it's actually not. Not when you're talking about 3D. In 3D,
I thought we were talking about the 2D top-down thing. If you're trying to do like a top-down where you have like the intersection between like the sprites and everything else, whatever you're designing there.
Yeah, we actually have when we get to 3D rotation, we'll be using a special type of linear interpolation called spherical linear interpolation.
Oh, I wasn't talking about that.
Okay.
No. Okay. He was talking about the 2D thing.
Okay, so that's basically how you can do smooth rotation in 3D. And I remember like when I first discovered this stuff, I was making like a third-person camera, and I would use a very extremely slow. I would use a very very smooth blend on it so that it would follow the player very very slowly, and it just made this like dramatic effect where the camera would just like slowly sweep around to wherever the player was facing, which was very cool. I had a lot of fun with that. That was like one of the first things I did when I was learning how to program. Okay, so we can also use tiles to display text. And let's see, let me just show you that first. So we need to load a font first, and then when we create the tile, we'll specify the font and the text that we want. And then we have these optional flags here. We don't have to include these if we don't want to. Let me show you, in fact, let me show you what it looks like without them. So I made some text and I centered it, and the handle is up here in the upper left, just like with a rectangle tile. But we have some options here when we create it. We can specify where we want that handle to be. And here I'm saying text center, which is horizontal center. And then text middle means vertical center. And so that's going to put the handle right in the center. And that will give us something like that. So it just rotates nicely right around the middle. So you have these different optional flags you can specify. And this is what they look like. This is how they control where the handle is. This is the default orientation in the top left. And you can make it in any corner or along any edge or right in the center, depending on how you want to position the text. So that's really handy. And if we want, this allows us to easily align text to any corner or any edge we want. And I'll show you how. This is going to create 9 different text tiles. And it's going to position them in the corners and along the edges. And it just uses those flags. So here, like for this example, like middle left, what I did is I set the, when I created this tile, let's take a look, let's look for it. Middle left. So I said text left and text middle. And so that means the handle is right here on the left and in the center vertically. And so that way I can just position it right here and all the text will be to the right of that. And so this is how you put text in the corner of something, basically. That's the easy way. So how many people knew that? The GUI system uses that pretty extensively in order to align text. Breadworks is typing something?
Yep.
He says he did not. I think I should explain angles a bit better, and I should also explain 2D coordinate subtraction, because that was not very clear. Okay, now we're going to move on to 3D. So if we want to add a third dimension, we can just draw it at a kind of an angle like this. And if you just picture, this is the z-axis, and if you just picture this going into the screen, this is the positive direction, and then this coming out at the screen towards you, this is the negative direction, then that's the z-axis. And I'm drawing a vector on oh, okay. No, I skipped over one. Okay, never mind. Ah, there we go. That's our 3D grid. So, practice drawing these. If you're using graph paper, you can draw the z-axis at exactly 45 degrees, and that way it'll line up with both the x and the y points. That's the easiest way to do it. But you need to be able to draw these. Definitely need to be able to draw these. So on this grid, this is x going in this direction. This is y going in this direction. This is z going in this direction away from you. That's forward. So positive x is right, positive y is up, positive z is forward. Okay, so can you find the coordinate 2, 2, 2 on this? Each of these coordinates has 3 components now for x, y, and z. Where would 2, positive 2, positive 2, positive 2 be? To find that, we'll move over on the x-axis 2 units. 1, 2. And then we're going to move up on the y-axis 2 units, 1, 2. And then we're going to move forward on the z-axis 2 units, and that's going to be something like 1, 2. So I would expect the coordinate 2, 2, 2 to be right about here. There it is. I changed the order I did this in here. I went on the z-axis 1, 2. I moved over on the x-axis 1, 2, and then I went up on the axis 1, 2. But you end up in the same place. Now, can you picture a box with one corner at coordinate 2, 2, 2 and another corner at the origin? That's 0, 0, 0. What would that look like? You need to be able to draw this on paper. It would look like that, right? And each corner of the box, well, you would have one corner at 2, 0, 0. You would have one corner at 0, 2, 0. This would be 2, 2, or no, sorry. Yeah, 2, 2, 0 would be this point right here, right? And then on the far, that's your near. That's the face that makes up that's the nearest face. And then the face that's further away from you, you would have your point 2, 2, 2. And then if you move over left, you're going to have 0, 2, 2. If you move down, you're going to have 0, 0, 2, because that's just 2 on the z-axis. And then if you move to the right, you're going to have 2, 0, because there's no height, so it's 0. And then 2, because it's forward 2. You need to be able to understand and draw these things really, really easily. This needs to just be completely intuitive to you in order to be able to make 3D games.
Why does it look like a rectangle?
I can tell you why. What's the length of the... Okay, look at the length of the units here on the x-axis. And look at the length of the units on the z-axis.
They're not.
It's stretched.
Yeah.
This isn't a 45-degree angle, but if you do draw on your z-axis at a 45-degree angle, and you make the units line up with the x and the y, then the length of each unit on the z-axis is going to be longer than the x and the y. In fact, it's going to be the square root of 1 squared plus 1 squared. So that's 1 squared is 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So that means the length if you have it at a 45-degree angle, then the length of each unit on your z-axis is actually going to be the square root of 2, which is 1.41 and something. So that'll actually stretch out your drawings by 40%. On the z-axis, but that's still okay because it makes it easier to line up the units that way on the z-axis.
Right, but in 3D, it'll just be a perfect box.
Right. If your z-axis was not stretched out like that, then yeah. That would be a cube. And so what I'd really recommend you do with your graph paper and your ruler that you got, just pick a few random boxes and just draw them out. And, in the instructions here, it also says, pick some random coordinates and draw them where they should be on paper. Because you really, really need to be able to visualize this stuff. It just needs to be second nature to you. So, and drawing it on paper is the way to train your brain. Because if you draw enough pictures, eventually you won't have to draw pictures anymore. You'll just see it in your mind. So the way you can easily, anytime you need to, you can easily visualize the coordinate system. Just do this with your hand, with your left hand. It only works with your left hand. And that your fingers will form X, Y, and Z. What's that?
that all the time,
Yep.
especially with like rotation. When I like figure out what axis to rotate something on, I like do that and then I rotate. I go, okay, my middle finger is the X, and I rotate.
Yep, and this is actually the official Leadwerks gang sign. So whenever in a social situation, it's a great idea to flash this sign so that everybody will know that you're very cool.
It's also how when I got older and I was learning 3D modeling, how I learned like CAD and everything else. I would look at my hand and rotate it while I was looking at the model. So
Yep.
Just
So
don't
we use...
flash it in the wrong neighborhood.
What's that?
Just don't flash it in the wrong neighborhood.
Yeah, not in any of those right coordinate system neighborhoods.
Yeah.
All right. So we use the left hand. We use our left hand for to show the coordinate system. But so if we want rotation, let's talk about rotation. If we rotate around the y axis, which direction is positive and which direction is negative? Does anybody know?
I know, but I'm just getting other.
Does anybody else know?
I want to see somebody else say it. See if somebody can guess it.
To figure that out, we use the left-handed rotation rule. So if you want to know which way positive rotation is, you just point your thumb in the direction of the axis, and then your fingers will curl around in the positive direction of rotation. So that means for the y-axis, that means positive is like this. So like my hand would turn to the right. On the x-axis, positive would pitch my hand down. So it like tilts forward if you add rotation. And then for the z-axis, my hand would sort of tilt to the left with positive rotation. And so anytime you're not sure, just use the left hand rule like this. Should probably make a video of this, like actually showing it. Okay. So, all right, so far, what do you guys think? Are you learning?
All I retain from that is the awesome gang sign.
Yes.
That's a start.
Yeah, it comes in very handy.
Yeah, just don't use the wrong hand. Might get shot using a right-handed coordinate system.
Just invert the variables or something. You'll be fine.
That's a good way to get shot. Rotation thing would be easier to understand a video of your hand. Yeah, I agree. And I kind of like realized as I was saying this. One really great way to tell if, if something sucks is to try to explain it to somebody else. Because if you're like, yeah, then you realize your explanation kind of sucks. Use the hood in all the left-hand coordinate system neighborhoods. So that would be like most modeling programs, Blender, DirectX. Actually, internally, Vulkan and OpenGL are both use a right-handed coordinate system. But I just flip around the z-axis to compensate for that. Okay, now let's talk about 3D vectors. So we know what a coordinate system is. We can consider any point. Let me see. Did somebody have something else to say? Okay. So we can consider any 3D coordinate to be a point in space. We can also consider it to be, if we draw a line from that coordinate to the origin, that is position 0, 0, 0, we can also consider it to be a vector. And a vector has a direction and a magnitude or a length. Magnitude and length are the same thing. That's a 3D vector. We have a special class for handling vectors, and this is called the vec3 class. Oh, it's not set up to link. This is the source data for the documentation. We're just looking at GitHub right now. And it has 3 different components that you can access for X, Y, and Z. That's how you construct it. So 2, 4, 0, and then if I printed this out, it would print 2, 4, and 0 for the X, Y, and Z components of the vector. So you can think vec3s, it can either be a point in space, so like I use a vec3 for entity positions, or it can be a line from the origin to that point in space. We can calculate the length of a vector with this equation. So the length is equal to x squared plus y squared plus z squared. And this is actually a formula you need to know this by heart, and you need to be able to work this out with on paper, maybe using a calculator for the square root. So let's find the length of a vector of a vec3 that has length 3, 4, and 0 for the x, y, and z components. 3, 4, 0. Well, 3 times 3, 3 squared is 3 times 3, that's 9. And then 4 squared is 4 times 4, so that's 16. And 0 squared is just 0. So 9 plus 16 is 25. Plus 0 is still 25. What's the square root of 25? Anybody? Square root of 25?
Wait, do you actually want somebody to answer that? It's 5.
Thank you. The square, yeah, so the length of that is 5 of that vector. That's a nice one because it works out to be integers, so it's easy to solve. Well, we don't have to do that every single... This is what the code for that would look like, but we don't have to actually work that out ourselves. We just use the length method, and that will give us the same result. So there it prints 5. The reason you want to be able to do this, you want to know this formula by heart, and you want to be able to do this on paper with a calculator, is because if you're drawing stuff, you need to be able to figure out the length of different vectors. Okay. A normalized vector is a vector with a length of 1. And the way we actually can do that is if we find the length of a vector, and then we divide each component, x, y, and z, by the length, then the result will be a vector with length 1.0. And in mathematics, that's called a unit vector. In computer graphics, we often call this a normal. So you might have heard of vertex normals. And a vertex normal is just a unit vector. So it's a vector with a length of 1 that tells the lighting, it usually tells lighting routines like which direction the surface points at that vertex. And that's used to make curved surfaces appear curved. And this is how we normalize a vector in code. So we'll create a vector -2, 4, and 0. And then we'll just normalize it with this command, and then print out x, y, and z, and then we'll get the length of it and just confirm that the length should be 1. And yeah, it gives us some really uneven numbers. And the length is 0.999999999. Yeah, that's 1. That's just floating point numbers on computers are not always exactly precise. So when we did that, the x and the y values both got a lot smaller in order to make the overall vector have a length of 1. And so if this was our vector before, this is what it looked like before. This has a length of like 4.4 or something like that. This is what it looks like after. I think it might be a little bit short, but it's the same direction, but now the length is 1.0, is exactly 1. So that's what a normalized vector looks like. You need to be able to think in your mind, like if you see a vector, what would it look like if I just shrank it so that it was exactly 1 unit long? Same direction, but now it's a lot shorter. Okay. How many people knew that?
Well, I mean, I do.
I knew about it, but it's always hard to tell when to use it.
How many people knew it in pictures like that? Like could think of it just instantly as a in your mind as a picture?
I definitely could. I was already thinking about it while you were describing it, doing other things, but yeah.
Steven, how about you?
I know normalizing vectors, going that making any number referencing to 0 to 1, but the whole the and I know what like length does, but again, knowing when to use it is my difficulty.
Do you feel like you really like intuitively understand it like that to where you just instantly see it?
That's a great question. So I know I know like what it will do. Like the length kind of is a little bit difficult, but I knew what normalized always meant.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about vector addition. This is very easy. If we want to add two vectors together, all we have to do is add each component of the vector. So if we want to make a vector c out of a and b, cx is just ax plus bx, cy is ay plus by, and cz is az plus bz. So if we do this in code, then this is what it looks like. We construct our first vector, 1, 2, 3. We construct our second vector, 2, 3, 1. And then c is just a plus b. So what this gets, so c will be 1 plus 2 is cx, so that's 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. So c is going to be the vector 3, 5, 4, right? It should. Let's make sure that works. Three, 5, 4, yeah. Because we just added x, y, and z's together. Okay, there's another way. I don't really think of vectors like this. I don't really think in math. I think in like spatial geometry. There's a really easy way to add vectors together. If you want to add these two vectors together, what you do is you just take one of them. Let's start with this one. And then we take the other vector and we put it right at the end of the first so that it's here. We'll just move it over here. And the result will be the starting position and the final position. So when we put these things together, here's the first vector. And then we move over by the second vector. And the result is this vector. That's vector addition. So one example of this would be if you have, I haven't got to it yet. I was actually drawing this morning. I'm gonna give an example where you're using keyboard input to move up, down, left, and right, and you're doing that by adding a vector each time. And then so if you press up and right at the same time, like here, this would be like if you're pressing up on the keyboard. This is like if you're pressing right on the keyboard. When you add those together, then the resulting motion is this, up and to the right. And then I'm going to talk about how this vector, the length of this is longer than either of these. And that's why sometimes in some first-person shooter games, if you move it in a diagonal motion, you'll move faster. So the way you can fix that is by normalizing this vector so that its length is 1, and then you can multiply it by whatever you want. So then I'm going to talk about vector multiplication. Subtraction is just take the opposite vector. Division is don't really use division so much. Inverse vectors, that's just multiplying the vector by -1. The dot product, that's how much two vectors face each other, how alike they are. The cross product, I only use that really for constructing 3x3 matrices, so I might not even talk about that. And then there's the reflection vector. I'll talk about that and give an example. And that's all I've got so far on this series. I haven't even gotten into like 3D rotation and planes and space transformations and stuff. That's very interesting stuff, but it took me like several days to write this stuff and to figure out how to explain it. So it is kind of slow going. Let me take a short break. You guys can talk amongst yourselves for a few minutes, and then I'll be back in a second and we'll talk about like your impressions of this.
I just want to say I had told Josh a while back that he should do this kind of lesson. For me, it just reminds me of all the work I did in GLSL, and it was a pain, man. It was a pain.
Well, the thing is that, like, I learned all this stuff in, like, high school, but, you know, in high school, it's just get the answer right and you're good. It wasn't like, oh, I need to build this thing and I don't know how to do it. And I see vectors as, like, array of numbers. I don't see them as, like, related to 3D. So
that's what I had told you before, Reap, was the way that I imagine it, because I'm not very good at math. The way that I have to do it is I have to correlate what I'm reading into a three-dimensional object. It's like if you told me what a cat was, I'm not going to think of like a mathematical equation of a cat. I'm going to think of an image of a cat. So once I learned to convert like vectors from a language perspective to a image in my head, the math is not as important, because then it's just, oh, I'm just typing that language out into the code and wow, I'm getting actual outputs. Is it difficult? Yeah, it took me 8 years of my life to learn it. And did I get anything value out of it? Not really.
Sounds like the friends you made along the way, I guess.
Yeah, it's all the friends I made along the way. The only reason I'm here is because of what I did before. It's like that image I posted. It's like a Vietnam flashback where I'm going, oh no, I know where he's going. I like how I called it just before. I was like, time for vector multiplication. Here we go.
I needed water. I can like barely talk.
I gotta make a video going over everything again when everything's final.
Yeah, this is the practice run. Not really practice, but like kind of working out the, how to even explain this stuff.
Well, Josh, I don't know if you heard what I had said. I'm glad that you're doing this because I told you you'd be the perfect guy to do it, to teach people.
Well, the idea is hopefully if people understand this, then instead of saying, being helpless and being like, well, I need a tutorial for this specific thing, hopefully they'll just be able to see it and understand immediately, like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do. Because I see a lot of questions about, I don't know, stuff that, like, if you understood it, like the 3D, not really the math, but just like the spatial whatever. If you really just understood that, then it would be very, very easy for you to, to set things up, do what the person is asking about.
Right.
Well, there's a question that when I was taking psychology, you often have to ask people is, can you imagine a square in front of, like, in your mind? And then imagine the square becomes a cube. Now rotate that cube in your head. And that's how I started to learn my understanding of like linear algebra and everything else, because I had to convert from what I was being taught into mental imagery, and then with code at least, the math was not as important as just the expression of the variable within the code. It sounds absurd, but it's like how I often did things.
Yeah.
And also, I also just see a vector as just an array of numbers. I don't see it as anything relating to like 3D exactly.
I just see it as a line in space, like a piece of string in space.
Right.
I mean, I guess I fall in between both of you. I kind of see it as like you get the general array, and then I think of like I used to deal with space-time diagrams, which are a little more complex, obviously, because those have a dual vector that has to come off the z-axis because you're accounting for time and everything else. And I have to kind of create that rotating model of that in my head, and then create the general space-time diagram that would explain that. A little more complex than using like a modeling program or GLSL outside of certain use cases. But for me, I see it as a three-dimensional structure, and then the way that the three-dimensional structure is set up, as you rotate it, the vectors rotate with it. If that, like, I assume that's kind of what you were getting at earlier. I can see the X, Y, Z axis rotating with the object in my head, which is strange to say, I know, but. And then again, I spent almost a decade on learning that stuff, so.
Yeah. What about you guys who aren't talking? What do you think? The quiet ones. Broadworks, what do you think? Is this helpful to you? Do you feel like this will make you a better game developer? And also you folks out in YouTube land. Let us know in the comments. Where are you at with your understanding, with your spatial visualization skills? Where are you on your spatial visualization journey?
I'm pretty sure you're doing a much better job than our public education system teaching these concepts.
One
That's a very
advantage,
low bar.
one advantage I have is a lot of the math. I mean, you can find like diagrams and stuff of the math, but a lot of the conventions are arbitrary. Like for airplane coordinate systems, they like the y-axis is pointing downwards. I think it's a right-handed system with the axis pointing downwards, and like because they don't commit to like I've committed because I have a specific piece of software. I've committed to things like the left-hand rule for rotation and a left-handed axis. But if you're just doing general mathematics, then it's kind of arbitrary. And so it is harder to like pin down. It's harder to teach, I think, because it's harder to pin down a specific definition since there isn't one.
Can I ask you something, Josh? So for the series that you're working on right now, how long do you want each of your like videos to be that you want to present to people to learn from?
They'll probably end up being like 6 to 10 minutes each.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, with how people's attention span is, you give them those little short little bits, and then you can guide them into it. It's like when you started going into the vector bit. That's why I said like time for vector multiplication, because I thought I was like, yo, he's gonna go into it, but I guess you hadn't finished what you were working on.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a good chunk of content there because there's a lot of work there that I've noticed. Even Khan Academy doesn't really cover it fully well because they oversimplify exactly how a lot of this works. This is a lot of the stuff I worked with shader programming.
Yeah, definitely. This is, yeah, all of this is like the basis of shader programming. Let's see. Um, I've got a whole list here, and I'm not very far into it. So I guess then, okay, so this is where I'm at basically. Um, Still need to do rotation, Euler angles, talk about gimbal lock, quaternions, spherical linear interpolation, space transformations, that's the transform point, vector, normal, rotation commands, plane commands. Camera projection, we've got orthographic and perspective. Axis aligned bounding boxes, there's a lot of interesting math you can do with those. 3D planes, which are super interesting, and then talk about how a series of planes can be used to form a convex volume, which is how our brush geometry works. That's the space visualization lesson series. That's probably going to be about 8 or so lessons. It'll probably be like an hour and a half long video total. Then I want to
Oh,
do a series on game mechanics, talking about like very common things that you use all the time. And if you understand the spatial visualization stuff, then that's going to make game mechanics a lot, like raycasting, a lot easier to talk about. And then another series on game physics. And again, like 3D spatialization is basically a prerequisite for that. Because then once you understand that, then it's just a lot easier to explain all this stuff. And those are sort of the found in my view are sort of like the really important foundational topics. If I can explain this stuff really really well, then you at that point you pretty much know how to make every game. The rest
One
of it
thing
is just you might have to look up like what the specific command is that you need to use and how it works. But if you understand those things, then you know how to make games.
one thing I would like to see is like just like still like short tutorials though, but it references all that documentation and explains areas where you would use all of that math and um, all the things explained in there. Because
Well, what I want to do is add like lots of example. What I'm planning on is having lots of examples thrown in, like okay, so if we know, okay, so
like the spaceship example, like
yeah, exactly, stuff like
people be
that.
like, oh, I can use this for this, or I can use this math for that. That's what I want. That's what I want more of.
Yeah, that would be a good place to put to just insert those things in there. Yeah, that was interesting. As soon as Breadwork saw the the spaceship example, he was like, "Oh, now I know how to do this. Cool."
Like if we do a tutorial on ray casting, definitely like do like laser beams or something, because that's like how I see ray cast. It's just a beam from one point to another.
Right, and that would use the vector
Yeah,
reflection command.
you can use reflections. You can actually you'll be able to visualize everything,
Yeah.
and then people can at home just run that code and just see it, or copy pasting using the game projects.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, honestly, like if you understand 3D spatialization, game mechanics, and game physics, if you understand those three topics, if I do a really good job of explaining those three topics, then you're a game developer. And gonna that's gonna get you so much further than tutorial hell that I think a lot of people are stuck in, where they want to do something and they Google it, and there's a video of some wannabe developer talking about it for a long time, but they're not really explaining the underlying concepts that you need to understand. And this is my hope.
Well, this is what I had said to you before, where it seems like if you can, I know you have a lot going on with your engine development, but having talked with you the last 6, 7 months on various accounts, uh, I was telling you, like you have the patience to sit down where you can break this down for people, and a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, "Oh, can you give me literature on this?" And a lot of it comes from like places like Khan Academy and everything. And I don't want to bash them; they're pretty good, but they're only good if you have the foundational knowledge. And from where you were coming from today, you actually give that foundational knowledge for people to start from. And especially if you stick within that like 6 to 10 minute window, that'll give people a referential point to actually develop a system within their game engine. And then, who knows, maybe your work will actually lead to people making valuable products and things that people actually enjoy. And they'll learn from it.
And I'll get fewer requests for a tutorial how to make the camera rotate 45 degrees. No, now I want. Now I need to rotate. Now I need a tutorial on how to make it rotate 46 degrees. Now I need a tutorial on how to make him jump 3 centimeters higher. Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing it, Josh. I'm glad. I don't know if my advice had any impact on it, but I've been telling you this is something that I think you'd be very good at. I'm not very good at this kind of thing, but I think you can do it.
Well, I mean, when you were saying this, you were talking about like explaining code, which is not. I don't feel is terribly useful for people. But the spatial visualization stuff is super important. Um, so if if I'm able to convey that kind of stuff to people, that's gonna do like so much more for them than just watching random YouTube videos.
Yeah, I noticed that with a lot of channels, and for me, like I have, as you know from my experience, I've done both the code side and I've done both the math side, but I'm much more of a visual person, and I know the value that that has. So you're much better at converting the visual and the initial like base level math aspect into like, hey, you don't have to worry about that in the code, you just have to know how to visualize, and once you visualize and correlate the information, if you're doing like A plus B equals C or whatever, etc. things, you're good. I can't do that. I don't have that skill.
I hate math.
So do I, dude.
Math sucks. It's just a detail of how it works, and then but yeah, I mean, you're done with the math, then you don't have to really deal with it anymore.
Well, I kind of fake it till I make it. Like cyclone stuff is just hard values. Whoever felt good. Everything
Half
better.
I'll put it this way. A lot of people were like me over a decade ago, when I had no knowledge of any of this. I was like, okay, how do I make this shader do what I want it to do? So I'd open the shader, then I would pull up page after page after page after page of like papers and everything, and then you'd be like, oh, all to change this little equation. Oh, that's what that means. Oh, that's what that means. And then the moment I crossed that threshold where I was like, oh, it's making this 3D output, and it started to become easier. It was like, oh, all I have to do is modify this line and this line and this line, and that's just describing whichever way this thing is behaving within this space. And when that happened, I leapfrogged. I was able to actually picture it in my head, do the rotation in my head, and then go, oh, if I rotate it, each degree of rotation gives me a variable that I can add into the shader file. And that's how I learned GLSL. I had to kind of brute force it, bashing rocks together, essentially.
Well, what serious with me, the first I got was just taking mask and multiplying that, or adjusting its coordinates on the 2D plane. Hopefully there'll be more shader explanation if the shader system becomes a little bit easier after 5.1. That would be fun. I think having Philip wrote an excellent blog series on shaders. Yeah. So having something like that be part of the official documentation would be terrific.
Yeah.
It is kind of weird that we never really talk about this subject. We never we never
Don't
talk
blame
about
me.
yeah, we never talk about like 3D spatial visualization. We never really talk about it. It's just something that the experts just kind of do, and they don't really talk about it to anybody. They don't really explain
Well,
it.
you think people would know it because they live in it every day.
You know, that makes
Well,
it
it's
relatable, but
when I was doing so we had to do a few years ago on a project I was on that I won't name. I was doing 4D visualizations. So we had to use like space-time diagrams. So when you're doing that, you have the x, y, and z coordinate, but then you have to add the two additional coordinates. It's not one additional coordinate, it's two additional coordinates because the secondary coordinate has to be in relation to some other coordinate within the plane that you're rendering. And so when you're doing that, I just visualized it. So when I was working on the shaders for that, it was like, okay, so this thing is moving at this velocity. So I have the velocity calculation, but then I have the negative velocity calculation from the momentum. And I would have to visualize how that looked. And then when I would try to talk to people about it, I didn't even think about the coding side. I just tried to explain the visual side. And then with the people that actually had some knowledge, I would go over the shader side and they'd say, why are there so many variable calculations? Well, that's general relativity for you. And so it was like, I didn't think about the degree in which you're thinking about this, Josh, where you have to like simplify it down. And yeah, you have to step it down initially and then move it into the vector graphs. And then from the vector graphs, once you can understand that perspective, then you get an understanding of a 3D space represented on a 2D grid. Because remember, even your screen right now is a 2D grid. You're displaying across pixels. You know, you load that into the frame buffer and so on. So, it's difficult for many people with the higher education in this to actually explain that to somebody who doesn't have that experience, and it does take time, but eventually the math doesn't mean as much for what you're actually doing. It's more about what you're writing. It's a language. And the language is simply your visualization represented, I guess, on a grid, so to speak. I don't know, it's hard to put into words.
yeah,
So
I always think of those things that we had in like kindergarten where we had those you had like a little like centimeter cube made out of wood, and you'd have
Oh,
like
I love
you'd
those.
have like 1,000 of those, and
oh
then
yeah.
you'd have 10 of them glued together in a line, and then you'd have some flat pieces that were like a 10 by 10 grid of those that was 100 of them glued together, and then you had like one or two like big cubes that was 10 of those stacked up and glued together. There was like 1,000 of those cubes. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's some millennial stuff right there, dude. I don't
do
think
you
they do that
remember?
anymore.
Do you remember the pegs with the rubber bands too?
Vaguely, but I don't remember what they did.
They just taught you like it taught you pretty much what your explain with addition, where it's like, okay, you make the rubber band starts from this point, you go to
Hmm.
this point, but then you want to stretch this part, go this point. You can make triangles and squares, and goes into, and it can also be used to explain like n-gons and everything. But normally they didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, with
I
like
don't think they
plane.
do that. Not
No, they
anymore in
don't.
school.
Hmm. Uh, yeah, with planes, I always picture it as like a piece of paper floating in the air, and then just extending the sides to like slice the entire universe into two pieces. And then with vectors, I just picture it as like a piece of string like suspended at some point in the air.
It's funny when I was describing about the 2D thing earlier because I had misheard what had been said. In my case, I was saying like when you take a sheet of paper, one of my earlier teachers when I was having some struggle with it, he showed me how you could take two sheets of paper and then you have the two sheets separate from each other and then you fold them and you can extend from each angle and each angle has a defined variable and then from those angles you can derive, which this is how I learned derivations, you can derive say the z-axis. or any other access from the central point. So maybe it's like a different way that you had learned about the string thing, Josh. But to me, that's how I learned it initially when I was in school.
Yeah, I didn't use that to learn or anything. I mean, that's just how I picture things. Um, all right.
Interesting.
Let's see. Yeah, so that's all I got right now. Now check out Resonant Dusk on Steam, and I think there's a link up here. I'll put a link in the video too. Yeah, Resonant Dusk is on sale. For the rest of this week until Monday. Maybe longer, I'm not sure. But yeah, pick that up on Steam. It's a good game to play during Halloween. Any other thoughts about the tutorials or anything else? I'm gonna wrap this up.
Do you have a public page for them, or is this all just private on your end?
No, it's on the GitHub repository is public. Yeah, this is the source data for. What I do is I edit it in GitHub, and then the documentation system pulls all the data from GitHub. So if I type in, let's see, what's the name of this? 3D vectors. Even though it's not listed in the table of contents, I can grab this page. And that's what it looks like in the documentation system.
Now, is it only you can view this, or anybody, right?
Anybody can.
All right. Yeah, if I'll ask Reap to send me the information, but yeah, that's I want to read through it. I'm not going to try to do any corrections, but I have you on Steam and everything, so maybe I can give you some pointers or something, things to cover if I notice anything else.
Yeah, the Git, so the Leadwerks documentation system, this has a caching system that keeps the same page in cache for quite a long, probably for like a full day or 6 hours or something. And then the GitHub documentation, this is likely to be more up to date because this just updates whenever I modify it. So yeah, I hope you guys find this stuff useful. I hope it helps you in your game development journey. I do think that understanding this kind of stuff will put you I think it's a better use of your time than watching random YouTube videos. I'm hoping that this will be a more effective way of teaching you to become a game developer. So thank you for joining us, and I will see you on the forums.